There's a number that predicts whether you'll survive a bad month financially, and it's not what you think. It's not your salary. It's not your savings total. It's $500. Research shows this is the exact amount that separates people who can absorb a shock from people whose entire life falls apart over one bad week. Have you ever had your car make a weird noise and felt actual dread before you even knew what was wrong? Welcome back to Capital Science. Today, we're talking about the $500 rule, why this specific number matters more than almost any other number in personal finance, and what it reveals about who's actually financially stable versus who just looks stable. Let's start with where this number comes from. The Federal Reserve runs an annual survey asking Americans a simple question. Could you cover a $400 emergency expense using cash or its equivalent? Year after year, roughly a third of Americans say no. That's not people who are unemployed. That's not people living in poverty. A huge chunk of that group has steady jobs, decent salaries, even homes. They just don't have $500 sitting anywhere they can access quickly. Here's why that number specifically matters. $500 is roughly the cost of the most common financial shocks people actually face. A car repair, an emergency room copay, a broken appliance, a last-minute flight for a family emergency. It's not a rare catastrophic event. It's Tuesday. And when people don't have that cushion, here's what actually happens, not in theory, but in the data. They go to a credit card, or a payday loan, or they skip the repair entirely and let a small problem become a bigger, more expensive one later. Have you ever avoided fixing something small and then watched it turn into something way more expensive? That's the $500 rule in action. It's not really about the money. It's about whether a single unexpected event can knock you off your feet or whether you can absorb it and keep moving. Now here's where it gets interesting, because the psychological effect of not having this cushion is almost more damaging than the financial effect. People without a $500 buffer report significantly higher financial anxiety, even when their income is identical to people who do have that buffer. Same paycheck, same bills, completely different stress levels. Why? Because without that cushion, every single day carries a low hum of risk. You're not just living your life, you're constantly, quietly bracing for the next thing that might break, might go wrong, might cost money you don't have sitting around. Have you ever felt like you were waiting for something bad to happen, even when nothing was actually wrong yet? That's what living below the $500 line does to your nervous system. It's not one big stressful event. It's the absence of a safety net all the time in the background. So let's talk about why this is so hard to fix, because it's not simply a matter of just save more. For a lot of people, especially those living paycheck to paycheck, saving $500 doesn't feel like a project. It feels like an impossibility, because every dollar already has a job before it even arrives. Rent, groceries, gas. There's no leftover category called emergency fund in a budget that's already fully accounted for. And this is where the what the hell effect we've talked about before shows up again. If you try to save and something knocks you back to zero, the natural response isn't to try harder next month. It's to give up on the whole idea, because it already feels like it doesn't work for you specifically. Have you ever started a savings goal, gotten knocked back down by one unexpected expense, and just stopped trying? That's not a failure of discipline. That's a completely predictable response to a system that keeps punishing the exact behavior it's supposed to reward. So what actually works? Because just save $500 clearly isn't cutting it for a third of the country. The research on this is surprisingly consistent, and it points to 3 specific shifts that actually move the needle. First, the target amount matters less than making it automatic. People who set up even a tiny automatic transfer, $10 a week, $20 a paycheck, build the buffer more reliably than people aiming for a bigger number they have to consciously choose to move every time. The habit matters more than the size, at least at first. Second, separate the account completely. Not just a different savings goal in the same app, an actual different bank, ideally one that's slightly annoying to transfer out of quickly. The friction that makes saving harder also makes spending it on non-emergencies harder. That's the whole point. Third, and this is the one almost nobody mentions, redefine what counts as starting over. If an emergency wipes out your buffer, that's not failure. That's the fund doing exactly its job. The goal was never to keep $500 forever untouched. The goal was to have $500 there the moment you needed it. Using it is success, not failure. Have you ever felt like you failed at saving when really the money did exactly what it was supposed to do? Here's the bigger lesson underneath all of this. Financial stability isn't about how much money you have overall. It's about whether you have a buffer between you and the next unexpected cost. Someone earning $80,000 a year with zero buffer can be more financially fragile day to day than someone earning $45,000 a year with a steady $500 set aside. The income number gets all the attention. The buffer number is the one that actually determines how a bad week feels. And that's really what the $500 rule is pointing at. It's not a magic number that fixes everything. It's the threshold where your financial life stops being one unexpected expense away from chaos and starts being something you can actually manage. If you've ever had that moment, staring at your phone after a repair estimate, doing the math you already know isn't going to work out, you're not alone, and you're definitely not bad with money. You're just living below a threshold that most systems were never built to help you cross. Drop a comment if you've got your own $500 story, the exact moment something small almost knocked everything over. I read every single one. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the next breakdown.